The first team to request a Brian Flores interview, maybe the first of many, it's the Baltimore Ravens. Let's see just how interested they are on Vikings.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcasting network. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The wild card round is here, and FanDuel is officially in playoff mode. So visit FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL, and grab your profit boost pack every NFL playoff game day. I am here once again with an AFC North Locked On host. Here this time, it's Locked On Ravens, Kevin Ostreicher. Full transparency. We scheduled this, and I was going to ask you like Lamar Jackson questions about like blockbuster trades, and we were going to have a silly conversation. And the reason was there were all these leaks that Lamar Jackson was dissatisfied with the Ravens. Well, it appears that this has played out in the opposite way, where Lamar Jackson won the power struggle, I guess. But is my read on that correct? Is the ousting of John Harbaugh and all of the staff surrounding him, is that enough? Is Lamar Jackson happy now?
Yeah, I mean, I think Lamar's going to stay, and I guess I'll start off, Luke, by saying I just guess I couldn't get away from Crossover Thursday. I just love him so much. Where like even when teams were eliminated, I mean, we just have to do it. We're recording this on Thursday.
Fun earlier last year.
Yes, I know, and that was a Ravens win, and that was
feels good. Yeah,
actually, the Ravens needed that one pretty badly. So
clearly,
didn't end up meaning anything in the end with the playoffs, but here we are now doing an eliminated Crossover Thursday technically. But yeah, I mean, to answer the question, I think this was a choice that Steve Bisciotti made with Lamar in mind, in terms of they understand that they have a window here, and they've, to this point so far, unfortunately, wasted that window. I mean, every year Lamar gets a year older, it's a waste. And Lamar just turned 29 on Wednesday, and I'm not saying that he's washed and 34 years old, but he's also not 24 either. And you're wasting that time frame. So
like 5-ish left before it starts to become a consideration.
And I think he can play for a long, especially like if the new offense that they get, is focused more on certain things. I think that he can have a long career even when he turns.
The hope
30,
is he could age
35.
like Aaron Rodgers aged.
Yeah,
because Aaron Rodgers was such a runner earlier, and then, later in his career.
But I think people see like, okay, Cam Newton takes a ton of those hits, and I was like, Lamar's not a Cam Newton type of quarterback. Like Lamar protects his body. Like they're different styles of mobile quarterbacks. So I think, to me, they understood that, like, look, they needed to change something. And there have been a lot of reports out there about how this went down. A lot of we're in the middle right now, Luke, of an Ian Rappaport versus Adam Schefter source off, which I did not expect, where if you didn't hear about it, Ian Rappaport said that John Harbaugh lost the locker room and all the stuff about, all this, how this is how it went down. And then Adam Schefter on the Pat McAfee show and said, I think that could not be any less true. And
interesting.
So there is a fiery source off right now. Yeah.
I'm going with the Redditor.
Great. Yeah.
Right. Look, all that being said, and where John Harbaugh ends up, that's a very interesting side plot to all of this. But here in Minnesota, we're on Brian Flores' watch. We really want Brian Flores to return. He was such an important part of the Vikings. He was truly a load-bearing pillar of what turned into hilariously a winning season. And the defense carried the offense. So he's going to get interviews. But the interviews are coming out, and for a long time, nobody was calling Brian Flores' number. The Ravens are the first. So there's, I guess, two parts to this. One is, what are the Ravens looking for? And two is, what is Brian Flores looking for? So first, I would love to know, what are the Ravens after in a head coach? What is it that John Harbaugh didn't have that you would look for in the next guy? And I can tell you if I think Brian Flores has that, and then we can do the other side.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I think with John Harbaugh, he was predicated on a couple of different things, and that is the consistent success that this organization has had under him, particularly in the regular season, obviously. But early in his career, I mean, he AFC Championship game his first year and won a Super Bowl in 2012. Like, he had that. But then the other part was building a culture. And, for John Harbaugh, he came in with a lot of strong personalities in 2008. Ray Lewis, Ed Reed, Terrell Suggs. And it took a while for him to actually had to find his way as a head coach. He there were clashes, there were, closed door meetings, and there was apparently a mutiny before the Super Bowl about big disagreements. And eventually John Harbaugh turned himself into this player's coach, and everybody wants to play for. And I'd go to battle for that guy every single game. Like, that's who he was. He was known as a guy that, I want to go play for John Harbaugh. But it felt like as this thing continued on and the playoff losses started to stack up in the Lamar era, and the fourth quarter leads were being blown, and some of this weird game management stuff and clock management, it felt like the messaging began to feel stale. And you can even tell that just from the outside looking in of like, okay, how much these guys actually bought it. And I actually, Luke, take it back to before this season started. John Harbaugh went on the Lounge, which is the official Team Ravens podcast, and they were talking about the whole Super Bowl or bust mentality. And John Harbaugh, in his words, called that garbage and phony. And so when you have that mindset, I truly think like the head coach, that's the guy that you're listening to. And you need that guy to be a master.
Is it like we don't look that far ahead, we just want to go 1-0 every week?
It's something along those lines of like, every single day and all that. But people took that as like
all 32 teams or 30.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, sure. Like that typical conversation, right? But that mindset and some of the other stuff that we've heard, it just honestly felt like John Harbaugh got too comfortable, and to the very end, where apparently, like, according to certain reports, he thought he was going to be back with minimal staff changes. And I think with Brian Flores, a big thing, I mean, look, we know that the Ravens with Lamar Jackson, since he came in, have become an offensive team. Like, their offense has been incredible, historic, but this team's roots is all predicated in defense, dating back to that 2000s team. And you can talk about a lot of like 2006, even 2023, like that was a historical defensive unit. And so I think that the way that we saw this defense, I mean, it was honestly embarrassing, Luke, to see this Ravens defense play this year, because it was a lot of missed tackles, a lot of miscommunications, weird play calling. And Brian Flores actually in the Lamar Jackson era has become a bit of a figure in Baltimore after that 2021 Thursday night game when he was still with Miami, the cover zero game.
Oh, sure. Yeah, he figured it out.
Yeah, that was it. And that was essentially, that was the blueprint teams used. And Lamar eventually figured that out. It's not an issue anymore. But people in Baltimore look at Brian Flores as like, look at this bright defensive mind, very aggressive, and someone that knows what he wants to do. And it felt like at times, for Zach Orr in his 2 seasons, just kind of felt like he was dipping his toe in and trying to feel himself. This was his first time ever calling plays. The Ravens, I feel like, is a head coach because for 18 years, they've had a delegator, and I'm fine with delegators if you do it correctly, but it felt like that was kind of going off track a little bit, where John Harbaugh came in as a special teams guy, and we know the Ravens have been great at special teams, but to have a guy like Brian Flores, who we know can be a motivator, I know there's all this, I know Ryan Fitzpatrick had stuff to say, and there's been all these other rumors and reports.
That was from last year. I
December 2024 or something along those lines. I can't remember the exact day, but again, I think Brian Flores this year, especially with what he did in Minnesota, what he's proven in the past, and again, like, his situation was weird in Miami, and we all know that, so I'm curious to kind of see how it all unfolds for Brian Flores, but I think a lot of people here in Baltimore are excited about the possibility of what Brian Flores could bring that at the end of John Harbaugh's tenure felt like was kind of fracturing.
So there's a couple really interesting things there. Like, obviously the culture thing is the central question of Brian Flores. And I'm sure something that will be discussed in that interview, which is, how the culture of Miami kind of fell apart with Brian Flores, and how much that had to do with him bristling with ownership, which is kind of the next thing that I want to bring up is like, Flores wants a stable ownership situation. The Ravens are one of the most stable franchises in the league, but I would love to hear about kind of what the perception is of Steve Bisciotti, both insofar as like, how much is he going to like meddle? How much is he going to, get into, because like Stephen Ross was all up in Flores's business. He was telling him to lose games, allegedly. That drove Flores nuts. But also, like, he needs a guy that's good to work with, but he also needs a guy that doesn't care about this whole lawsuit, because that thing's still going on and it's still ugly. And two of the openings that are here are the Giants and the Dolphins, the subjects of that lawsuit. So suddenly that's two teams that are, you have to think, are out of the running. Are the Ravens going to care about that? And is Steve Bisciotti going to risk pissing off his buddies over in New York and Miami?
It's a good question. And honestly, the answer is I don't know. And I wish I had a better one. But I think Bisciotti, the big thing is he wants to win. he's been very clear about that he doesn't care about 30 years down the line and who's going to be in the organization and what does this mean long term and whatnot. He's been very clear. He wants to win now. And I think that for Brian Flores, he is a win now coach. Now, there are obviously other coaches I think that they can bring in and they can win now with. I think a lot of people also are infatuated in Baltimore with the pairing that everyone's talking about right now, Robert Saleh and Mike McDaniel. Like, there are other options for them that they can utilize. But I think with Flores, there's already a sense of respect, I think, for Flores with, first of all, Lamar Jackson, as well as the Ravens. And, I think the Ravens also respect Flores, but I think it is that unknown of like, what is all this stuff with the case that's going on? What's the ownership think about it? But the fact that they are even interviewing him in the first place, I think it's a step further than other teams have taken. So at least at that point, you're like, okay, well, they're not afraid to at least kick the tires on it. But I would expect, Brian Flores, in my opinion, he deserves to have a head coaching opportunity. And he's someone that I believe would be a great fit for the Ravens to be able to come in there. And, with John Harbaugh, it was always, to me, it's always been to me, Luke, about complacency, where I can't stand complacency with NFL franchises, where I'm just like, look, if you're 9-8 every year, like the Steelers are a prime example. It's like if you're 9-8 every year and you're not going anywhere, like it's the worst. It's the worst place you can be, and that's not even me talking about.
Yeah, I know.
The last
couple days because I'm just
saying. I know. I do it with Wig on Locked On NFL, where I always find a way, and it's not even intentional. Like Browns, Bengals,
it's in your blood. I get it.
There's always exactly. It's like Peter and I had a conversation. I was on Locked On Sports today, and we had a conversation about your crossover from 2022 or whatever it was, the legendary crossover.
Yeah.
So again, it's like that. That's always a thing with like the rivalries. But Pittsburgh is a prime example of this, where like they're in no man's land right now, and it felt like that's kind of where Baltimore was, just the more a shiny no man's land, as opposed to Pittsburgh, where it just feels a little bit more dreary, where it always felt like, okay, is John Harbaugh the guy to take him over the hump here, or do they just need to evolve? And they did that with Greg Roman and Todd Monken. Greg Roman was great for Lamar early in his career, and then it kind of fizzled out. The offense was stale, and they said, all right, we need to move on, get Todd Monken in, who evolved them. I think that they can do this from John Harbaugh, and I think for Brian Flores, he can be that guy to motivate these guys, to get them on the same page. And honestly, I would rather them make a move like Flores and have it be dead wrong, as opposed to them keeping John Harbaugh and continue to just wade in no man's land forever.
And I will go on your show sometime soon, probably early next week, to discuss that idea further. But from your guys' perspective, I'll tell you what I can tell you about Brian Flores. And as for the Steelers, they're maybe in no man's land, but they are playing Monday. So they've got that over both.
That is true. Yeah, you know what? That's true. That's true.
Kevin, thank you so much for your time. You can check that out on Locked On Ravens. Today's episode is brought to you by Robinhood. Nobody knows your money goals better than you. Robinhood puts you in control of your money with tools that work as hard as you do. Locking in on every opening, beating your PR, beating it again, channel that drive into your money. Robinhood puts you in control of your money. Trade stocks and ETFs, options, futures, and crypto all on one platform. You can now build and execute your own trades from a desktop with Robinhood Legends advanced tools, or take advantage of the new Robinhood strategies with a tailored portfolio managed by a team of experts. You expect more from yourself. Expect more from your money. Get started today at Robinhood.com/yourmoney. Again, that's Robinhood.com/yourmoney. Your money, your move. Thanks again for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. If you are an everydayer and you would like to go ad-free, no interruptions, you can do so with the Everydayer Club. Just go to lockedonvikings.supercast.com. You can sign up there for $5 a month or $50 a year and get Locked On Vikings ad-free, access to a special Discord server, and more. Thanks again to Kevin for his time on this. I thought that was going to be a longer conversation when we booked it. I thought I was going to do the same thing with him that I did with James Rapine yesterday about Lamar Jackson, but obviously things changed a little bit. So here's where we are at. As of this recording, in terms of Vikings interviews, we have the Flores Baltimore one that we just talked about. Durante Jones appears to be interviewing for DC jobs with the Jets and Raiders, Jets and Cowboys. And that's it. We're still waiting. Obviously, also, I think this morning, or the morning I'm recording this, which is Thursday morning, Mike McDaniel is out in Miami. So that is pretty good news for the Vikings because that does not open up a coach opening that we're sweating with Brian Flores. If Flores goes back to Miami, that is probably the most shocking thing that could happen. But it does throw another candidate in there that could take over another opening. I don't think that somebody else will hire Mike McDaniel as head coach, but it does become at least a possibility, even if it's not probable. And so add that to the list of outcomes. The Ravens, I am a little worried about it with the Ravens because they do have a stable organization and all that. However, I think if Kevin's right and their main concern is building like a winning culture, I don't know if Flores can overcome the reputation that has been pushed so hard about him ever since he left Miami. There was the Ryan Fitzpatrick clip that went viral that I talked about, and I only recently found out it was from last year. I must have missed it when it went around last year, about how Flores became a dictator, and the whole thing earlier this year about Tua Tagovailoa, or maybe that was the year before, and how the relation, every 3 months, you'll learn something new about how that relationship was bad and how Brian Flores mishandled Tua Tagovailoa. And so anybody that's trying to, keep their quarterback happy is also going to be maybe a little bit wary. But those aren't deal breakers. Those are just things the Ravens have to ask to Brian Flores. As for Durante Jones, I find that really interesting. As the Jets and Cowboys are two teams without head coach openings, somehow. But that tells me that if they're reaching out to Durante Jones, like none of those teams would take Durante Jones if they thought they could get Brian Flores. So that tells me that I don't think there is much expectation around at least those teams, and I could probably infer the rest of the league, that Flores will just like become a straight up pure free agent and willing to go be somebody's DC. Again, I would be surprised if Flores was anything other than DC in Minnesota or head coach somewhere else. I still feel like those are the two likely things. If Minnesota does let Flores go to be a DC somewhere else, it is an all-time fumble that would be so bad, I would be surprised that anyone let it happen. And I would be very, very, very critical of that. We're also waiting through our own firings over here. I have long projected that somebody would go, right? I don't know if it's going to be this guy or that guy, the whole offensive staff, Matt Daniels, who knows? But we haven't had anything yet. But I will say there was supposed to be a Kwesi and O'Connell press conference that I thought I was going to talk about today. Today's show didn't come together at all the way I thought it would because there was no press conference. They moved it. They rescheduled it maybe to next week, or they might have even postponed it indefinitely or whatever. That is weird. I asked on the squad show, I asked Sam Ekstrom and Arif Hassan, who spent time in the media room, who went to pressers, how weird is that? Am I reading too much into it? And Sam's answer, I mean, you could go listen to the show. It's on this feed. But Sam's answer was basically, yeah, they move stuff around all the time, especially in season, as like, well, we've got a meeting and this guy's not available. We got to, they'll just deprioritize the media when they have a football operation to do, which I think is fair. But not this one, not the postseason, wrap it up. This is almost always the week after you're done. Right? I mean, usually I'm used to it being like on locker cleanout day. You'll hear from coach, but we haven't heard from Kevin O'Connell since the post-game presser, which is, I think, highly unusual. I don't want to read too much into what it could possibly mean, but I have to think that there is a reason for that they're not just being lazy about media, right? Like that there has to be a reason for that. There is something they are waiting for to transpire, and maybe that is Flores. Maybe they want to get a contract with Brian Flores done so that they can like usher Kevin O'Connell and Kwesi Adofo-Mensah out there to like go take a victory lap on it or something like that. Or maybe there are decisions that haven't been made yet that are waiting for other machinations to go down in the league. There are a lot of teams waiting for other stuff to go down in the league. A lot of teams are waiting to see what happens with John Harbaugh, or waiting to see if John Harbaugh will come to their team. A lot of teams were waiting to see what would happen in Miami with with Mike McDaniel. Like all of those things have these trickle down effects that are going to affect how you decide what you're doing with your offensive and defensive coordinators. I might not bring my guy back if I knew I could get Mike McDaniel and I really wanted him, right? I do, for the record. A lot of people say they want Mike McDaniel in the Vikings building. And if they are going to make offensive changes, I'm with you. I'm 100% with you on that. I think him, especially as a run game coordinator, would be very fun. It's not a lot of what he did in Miami. They were not known for their run game. But I like the way that Miami puts run game together, especially with a fullback. Don't know what they're doing to replace CJ Ham or if they are at all. But I just like what he did in Houston when he was in Houston for that, what he did in Washington, and like all the way, like he was really like Mr. Run Game. And then he ends up on a team that like has the pieces to try to be deep passing. And I think there was always a little bit of weirdness to that. And it always felt like McDaniel was a little out of his element, maybe, where he figured out one thing that was really good, but he didn't have that like depth of, I don't know. I don't want to turn this into Locked On Dolphins, but I'm into the idea of McDaniel coming in and being handed the reins to something that Kevin O'Connell has repeatedly shown that he has no interest in managing, which is the run game. I think that would be a fantastic match, but obviously, being an offensive coordinator for an offensive-minded head coach is not a great path for getting back into the head coaching ranks, which I'm sure McDaniel is interested in. Not to mention, I still think that he could probably swing a head coaching interview or two and take a God's honest shot at that, and he'd be well within his rights too. So that's the coaching carousel. Elsewhere, there are a couple of other things that we probably need to discuss that are, I think, related to staff in a way, but also just related to the attitude of the Vikings as a whole. And it has a lot to do with how they managed injuries, something that I've spoken a lot about on this show this season, but I really want to just lay it all out for you. That'll be next on Locked On Vikings. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by FanDuel. The wildcard round is here, and FanDuel is officially in playoff mode. Every game day during the NFL playoffs, FanDuel is giving customers even more ways to get in on the action. Because right now, every NFL playoff game day, FanDuel users get a profit boost pack waiting for them inside the app. That means every single game day, that's Saturday, Sunday, and Monday this weekend, you'll see a pack loaded with multiple profit boosts that you can apply to whatever bets you like the most. You can lean into your game day instinct. So whether you're taking a big underdog, you're betting on a big favorite minus the points, a player prop, a big parlay that with like 900 legs, whatever it is that you do, you can put a little bit more juice on the bets that you already like instead of these promos that force you to bet something new that you've never really considered before. You make your picks, then apply your profit boosts to go after even bigger payouts while the playoffs get rolling. So visit FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL, and grab your profit boost pack on every NFL playoff game day. This episode is also brought to you by Rocket Money. Let's be real. Managing your finances can feel very overwhelming. Between all these subscriptions you forgot about, bills that keep going up, and trying to figure out where all your money actually goes, it can be a big, convoluted, tangled mess to keep track of. And who has the time for that? That is where Rocket Money comes in. The personal finance app that helps you take control. It finds and cancels your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps you lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It can be a bit of a shock to look at everything that you didn't even realize that you were paying for and see how much money was growing wings and flying out the window. Plus, the automatic transaction categorization is a game changer. You can finally see exactly where your money is going each month. You can set budgets and goals, get personalized insights, and receive real-time alerts for large transactions, upcoming bills, and low balances. Let Rocket Money help you reach your financial goals faster. Join at rocketmoney.com/lockedon. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. Moving on. The Vikings had an issue this year. And I want to lay out the entire year of this issue because it was a long year. This season took about 4 years to go down. And we have to remember just how some of the injury management stuff went down. And I think the Vikings should have to answer for this. Whenever they do get up in front of the podium, I hope somebody asks about this larger, broader trend. Because a lot of players played through injury, and a lot of players re-aggravated their injuries. They exposed players to risk, or maybe let players expose themselves to risk, but teams and this is a common wisdom. This is not a take that usually gets a lot of pushback. Teams have a responsibility to protect players from themselves. NFL players would go out there if they only had 3 limbs and they'd say it's just a flesh wound. It is on the people without personal $1 million stakes and incentives and all that. It is the people managing the team, and especially the medical staff, to make those decisions in ways that are going to keep players safe. Safety has to be paramount. And my read on the situation is that safety was not the first priority for the Vikings. Competitiveness was, which is very funny after a 9-8 season where they missed the playoffs. But that's not what this is about. This is about the Vikings eschewing player safety at multiple junctures this season. Let me read you the list. Let me know if I forgot any. The big one is Christian Darrisaw. There was a piece Alec Lewis wrote with some burning questions about the Vikings headed into the offseason, and one of them was, it was about the offensive line in general and how many injuries they suffered. They only had 78 snaps was a stat from that, with their intended 5 offensive linemen together. And the line gave up a lot of pressure, not to mention long pockets, long play calls with long routes, and quarterbacks that held the ball too long, even in those contexts, leads to a lot of pressure. Within that line, and only that line, you have the Christian Darrisaw issue. Christian Darrisaw tore his ACL and his MCL around Halloween of 2024. That is a timeline of typically 10 to 12 months, that injury. Usually an ACL takes 9 to 11 months. The MCL adds a month to it. That's the way I usually think about it. That's ACL recovery. Now, there are some crazy ways, there's actually some interesting new technology that maybe is better at healing those things, maybe a conversation for another day. And people have returned from ACLs or tried to, like, if they get it in camp, like late in the season or something. I think Aiden Hutchinson tried to do that with his leg last year, but there's stuff like that. But typically, an ACL to me is a 9-month injury, which means that usually, unless you get it in the Super Bowl, it's not going to affect you too much for the next year. But when you add that MCL, and when you're a bigger guy like an O-lineman, that timeline is that much more difficult. When the MCL tears as well, there's a lot of swelling involved in that, and you have to wait for that swelling to go down before you can operate on both the ligaments. That's what happened to TJ Hawkinson as well. TJ Hawkinson returned after about 10 months. After his injury, which was about halfway through the season. So Darrisaw's timeline would have put him around 10 to 12 months, would have put him around the start of the season to come back. At the latest, it would be like halfway through the year, because his happened earlier in the calendar year than Hawkinson's. So the fear of him like missing the entire year was out, but it was kind of seen like he's probably going to miss a few. And so that's why they brought in Justin School, which was a disaster, but that's not what this is about. He played in camp. He practiced in camp with a knee brace. He played week 1, and it was never right. He was on pitch counts. There was rotation. He would just straight up miss entire games. He was never right. In Alec Lewis's article, he said, like, the team, nobody knew. Darrisaw didn't know. The team didn't know. Nobody would tell anybody. Nobody knew if he was going to play that day. It was just how it felt. And to me, I don't know enough about knee recovery to know if, like, what that's up to. Some people are reading Alec's article, and I see how they're getting it, that it's like the Vikings are casting the blame on Darrisaw himself, like he's not doing the work right or something like that. I highly doubt that. It's a ligament. Like, I don't heal faster. Like, what are you gonna do? But like, it wasn't right, and he was back very early. He was back 9 months. He was going on it was a lightning fast timeline for that, and he was back to play. Now, was he pushing for himself to play? Were the Vikings saying, no, we need you? I don't know. But the pressure was there, right? Hey, JJ McCarthy is out there. We need to do what's right for JJ McCarthy's development. And doing what is right for JJ McCarthy's development fueled a lot of these decisions that I'll get to later. But the pressure from whoever it was, the pressure to play put Darrisaw out there before that knee was fully healed. That is a fact. We know that. Why it happened and how much damage it did, we'll see. But like at the very best, they exposed him to extra risk and he missed a ton of the year. And that knee was still bugging him all the way into December. It never got right. So to me, that feels like a pretty gross mismanagement. If they just let Darrisaw be on the PUP list or IR to begin the season and just had him back week 7, I don't think this happens. That's my hypothesis. I'm no doctor, but I'm a guy with an opinion, and that's my opinion. In a similar vein, Brian O'Neill tears his MCL on an extra point of all things in Dublin, or sprains his MCL. And he comes back early, and he is in and out of the lineup for the rest of the year and doesn't finish out the season with Blake Brandel at right tackle in that last game. So it's another situation just like it. Let me bring up the Ryan Kelly concussion issue. He suffered 3 concussions this season. That feels, that could be bad luck. It very well could be bad luck. That's the one I'm most willing to believe is bad luck because concussions are very difficult to predict and control at all. But Ryan Kelly coming back from concussion and then immediately getting another one, like when you get a concussion, there is a correlation. You are susceptible to more further concussions. I don't know if I blame the Vikings nearly as much for this at all, but it's worth bringing up. And Donovan Jackson, as Brian O'Neill revealed, played through a broken wrist for most of the year. He hurt that wrist in week 2, and he played through that for most of the year, gutted it out. And I thought did okay for a rookie. Had some problems, but broken wrist. I'm willing to give him quite a bit of leash. That's just the O-line. How about Aaron Jones, who played through a separated shoulder and re-aggravated? How about Josh Metellus, who played through a shoulder injury, re-aggravated it? How about TJ Hawkinson, played through a shoulder injury and then didn't finish the season? I don't know if he aggravated it, though. But the one for me that drives me the most nuts was how they handled Carson Wentz. I was furious when this happened, and I wasn't even that big of a fan of Carson Wentz, but I was furious on his behalf. Because I don't think there is any way that you can sell that situation to me that doesn't scream Carson Wentz is not important to this organization. JJ McCarthy is. JJ, your ankle can get 100% fully healed. Let me know if it hurts even a whittle, and I'll put a Band-Aid on it and give it a kiss. Carson Wentz, your body is dissolving. Get out there on a short week. Carson Wentz suffered a separated shoulder in London in week 5. That shoulder did not heal over the bye week, over the game he played against the Eagles, and then the game where he dissolved on live TV against the Chargers. They just threw him back out there. You cannot in any way tell me that JJ McCarthy was more hurt than Carson Wentz. You just cannot. Carson Wentz was a much more hurt player. But because it was only 99% healed, they let Carson Wentz go out there. Or if you want to call it a soft benching or whatever, I don't believe you, but it's in service of the same point, and we're not talking about that today. To me, they put a player's safety in jeopardy so that they could protect another player from a lot less jeopardy. Carson Wentz was in a much more dangerous situation than JJ McCarthy ever would have been, but because they didn't want JJ McCarthy going out there and looking bad on a bum ankle, they put Carson Wentz in danger. I'm sure Carson Wentz was pushing to play too. I'm sure he would have loved to. Everything he said, this is his hometown team in Minnesota. He loved it. He loved the opportunity to wear the purple. I'm sure he wanted to go out there. I'm sure he would have finished the whole season if you let him. But you have to protect these players from themselves. I think the Vikings need to answer for this. I do. I think that they have treated their players incorrectly. And I'm curious to see the NFLPA report card if they don't do away with that. But it is, to me, bordering on this issue between do you do what is right for the people in your building or do you do what is right for winning football games? And there is a point at which winning the game is no longer the important thing. These guys are humans with human bodies and hopefully human futures after the league that are all going to be affected by these decisions forever. You have to do right by them. You just have to. Not to mention, I think if you, for the example with the Darrisaw thing, I think if you treat that normally and you let him, start the season on IR and let that thing heal fully, I think you get more Darrisaw this year. But as it was, we saw Justin School. Somebody asked me about the Justin School problem. He played like half the snaps. Darrisaw missed more than half the season. That would not have happened, I don't think. It's like, it'd be really hard for you to convince me, I guess. I'll listen to an argument, but it'd be really hard for you to convince me that if they played that knee injury normally, that Darrisaw misses more than half the season. I just don't buy it. So I think the Vikings have a lot to answer for. I think people on their staff have a lot to answer for. And I certainly don't think we are done with Vikings news over the month of January. We'll see what plays out. I will talk to you next on Monday. And as always,